A teenage boy walks through hell on earth as the Nazis torch Belarus, and his face ages 40 years in 48 hours of screen time. The Soviet filmmakers who made Come and See didn't simulate war. They weaponized cinema itself, traumatizing their young star so thoroughly that critics still debate whether the shoot crossed every ethical line in existence. These are 20 weird facts about Come and See. And wait for the bonus, because the final scene almost killed someone for real. Number 20. The director waited 8 years to get permission to make this film. Elem Klimov first pitched Come and See in 1977. The Soviet censors read his script and basically said absolutely not. They thought it was too dark, too honest, too graphic about what actually happened when the Nazis invaded. Klimov kept rewriting, kept negotiating, kept pushing. By the time they greenlit it in 1984, he'd softened nothing. He just wore them down. The film they finally approved was the exact nightmare he'd always wanted to make. Number 19. They fired live ammunition over the actors' heads. You know that scene where Florya and Glasha are running through the field and bullets are ripping up the ground around them? Those are real bullets. The sound engineer set up live machine gun fire just a few feet above the actors' heads so the microphones could catch authentic sonic chaos. Alexei Kravchenko, the kid playing Florya, later said, "I knew if I stood up at the wrong moment, I was dead. No movie today would even consider this. Not for a second." Number 18. The film's title comes from the Book of Revelation. Come and see is what the voice says in Revelation when each seal breaks and another horseman of the apocalypse rides out. It's an invitation to witness horror, to stare directly into suffering. Klimov wasn't subtle about it. He's literally telling you this movie is about the end of the world. The original Belarusian title, Ide Smotri, translates the same way. Every frame asks you to bear witness to something unbearable. Number 17. The Nazis in the film are played by actual Soviet soldiers. Klimov needed hundreds of Wehrmacht troops for the massacre sequences, so he got the Soviet army to provide soldiers who dressed up as the enemy their grandfathers had fought. Imagine putting on a Nazi uniform when your country lost 27 million people to those uniforms. The soldiers reportedly found it deeply disturbing. But it gave the film an authenticity. You can see the hatred in their eyes isn't acted. Number 16. Alexei Kravchenko's hair turned gray during filming. The actor was 14 when shooting began. By the end, patches of his hair had literally gone white from stress. He spent 9 months in the Belarusian marshes, crawling through mud, witnessing recreated atrocities, living on the edge of psychological collapse. Klimov pushed him so hard that Kravchenko's body started manifesting trauma. His face in the final scenes isn't makeup. That's what prolonged anguish does to a human being. Number 15. The hypnosis wasn't movie magic. It was actual hypnosis. Klimov hired a hypnotist to put Kravchenko into altered states before the heaviest scenes. The kid would go under, and the hypnotist would fill his head with suggestions about fear, loss, and witnessing death. Then they'd roll camera while he was still half in trance. That's why his eyes look so hollow, so distant. He's literally not fully present. Some critics argue this crosses into abuse. Klimov argued it was necessary to capture real horror. Number 14. The cow scene was shot without any animal handlers present. When Florya tries to drag that dying cow out of the mud, that's a real cow genuinely stuck in real mud. They didn't have handlers standing by with a rescue plan. Kravchenko and the cow struggled together for hours while the cameras rolled. Animal rights activists today would shut down the production immediately. But Klimov wanted that scene to feel like watching something actually drown in front of you. Desperate and impossible and heartbreaking. Number 13. The film was banned from being shown to children in the USSR. Even the Soviet authorities, who'd greenlit this thing, took one look at the final cut and said, "Nobody under 16." They slapped an adult-only rating on their own propaganda piece. The irony is thick. They'd wanted a patriotic war film, and Klimov had given them a descent into Dante's Inferno. Kids weren't allowed to see what had been done to their own grandparents' generation. Number 12. Real World War II. Veterans walked off the set in tears. Klimov invited survivors of the Nazi occupation to watch the filming of the village massacre. Several of them couldn't stay. They left sobbing, shaking, saying it was too accurate. Too much like being back there. One veteran told the crew, "You've opened the wounds we spent 40 years trying to close." That's when Klimov knew he'd succeeded, and possibly gone too far. Number 11. The sound design uses subliminal frequencies to induce anxiety. Composer Oleg Yanchenko didn't just write a score. He engineered psychological warfare. The soundtrack layers in subsonic drones, reversed vocals, and frequencies specifically chosen to trigger fight or flight responses. Your body reacts to this film on a level below conscious hearing. You feel nauseous, tense, panicked, and you don't even know why. It's sonic manipulation disguised as art. Number 10. The cinematographer refused to use any artificial lighting for the massacre scene. Viktor Petrov insisted on shooting the Katyn-inspired village burning sequence with only natural light and the light from the actual fires they set. They torched a full-scale village set and let it burn while the cameras rolled. No fill lights, no reflectors, just flame and smoke and chaos. The shadows move wrong, the exposures go wild, and it feels like found footage from 1943. It's disorienting and nauseating, exactly what Petrov wanted. Before we get to the top 10, if you're still watching this, seriously, hit that like button and subscribe. This film is one of the most intense things ever made, and we're just getting started. Number 9. Klimov made Kravchenko watch footage of real war atrocities before scenes. The director would screen documentary reels from the Eastern Front, unedited footage of massacres, executions, piles of bodies. Then, with those images fresh in the teenager's mind, Klimov would send him in front of the camera. Kravchenko later admitted he had nightmares for years. He'd see those documentary faces when he closed his eyes. Klimov treated his lead actor like a soldier being conditioned for combat. Preparation or torture? You decide. Number 8. The aging makeup took 6 hours to apply and used experimental techniques. As Florya's face transforms from boy to old man, the makeup team employed techniques that wouldn't become standard for another decade. They built up layers of latex, pulled his skin with invisible threads, and used lighting tricks that required perfect synchronization between Petrov and the makeup artists. Kravchenko said sitting in the chair felt like being slowly turned into a corpse. The effect is so seamless that audiences genuinely believed they'd cast multiple actors. Number 7. The film was almost titled Kill Hitler. Klimov's original ending, which was shot but trimmed, showed Florya fantasizing about shooting a portrait of Hitler. And with each bullet, the film rewinds through the war, through Hitler's rise, through his childhood. He aims at baby Hitler and can't pull the trigger. The Soviet censors said this ending was too philosophical, too forgiving. Klimov fought for it, lost. And the film ended up titled Come and See instead of the more provocative Kill Hitler. That fantasy sequence still exists, though shortened. Number 6. The director's wife died during production, and he kept shooting. Elem Klimov's wife, filmmaker Larisa Shepitko, had died in a car accident 5 years earlier, and he'd been making this film partly as grief therapy. Then, midway through production, his mother passed away. He took 2 days off and came back to the set. The cast and crew said he directed like a man possessed, channeling every ounce of personal loss into the film's apocalyptic vision. Come and See is, in some ways, a funeral for everyone Klimov had ever lost. Number 5. The partisan camp scenes were shot at an actual World War II partisan hideout. Klimov took his cast deep into the Belarusian wilderness to the exact coordinates where anti-Nazi resistance fighters had hidden during the occupation. The bunkers were real, the trees still had shrapnel scars, and the ground had never been fully cleared of ordnance. They were essentially filming in an unmarked mass grave. Kravchenko said you could feel the ghosts in the soil. The location wasn't dressed, it was haunted. Number 4. Roger Ebert called it one of the most devastating films ever made, then rarely mentioned it again. After watching Come and See, Ebert wrote that it belonged on the short list of the greatest war films in history. He gave it 4 stars, called it a reminder of what war does to the innocent, and then seemed almost reluctant to bring it up in later writing. It's as if he'd witnessed something so overwhelming that he didn't want to send people toward it casually. The film scares even its champions. Number 3. The final close-up of Florya's face is one unbroken 8-minute take. That moment where the camera just holds on Kravchenko's destroyed ancient child face, mud-caked, dead-eyed, barely human, is 8 minutes in real time. No cuts, no relief, no looking away, no reaction shots, no editing tricks to give the audience a breather. Just his face, filling the frame, daring you to keep watching. It's one of the longest sustained close-ups in cinema history. And it feels even longer because there's nothing happening except the slow recognition of what bearing witness does to a soul. Klimov wanted you trapped with this boy. He wanted the experience to be unbearable, to test your limits as a viewer. Can you look at suffering for 8 uninterrupted minutes? Can you stay present with someone else's trauma? Or do you dissociate? Check out. Start thinking about dinner? The take is an endurance test for the audience as much as it was for Kravchenko. And speaking of endurance, Kravchenko said he dissociated during that take. For real, not as a performance choice. He stopped feeling his own face, stopped thinking in words, stopped being aware of the camera. He just existed in front of the lens and let it consume him. He described it as an out-of-body experience. I was watching myself from somewhere above, and the person in front of the camera wasn't me anymore. It was Florya. Or maybe it was just a ghost. Klimov didn't yell "cut" because he was waiting for something. Some flicker, some crack in the facade, some moment of authentic collapse. And Kravchenko gave it to him. Around the 6-minute mark, you can see his eyes change. Something breaks. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it's there. The shell fractures, and for just a second you see the terrified child underneath the trauma-aged mask. That's when Klimov finally called cut. He'd gotten what he needed. He'd broken his actor completely, captured the exact moment a human soul gives up, and he did it in a single unblinking take. The crew reportedly stood in silence afterward. Nobody knew what to say. They'd just watched a 14-year-old stop being a child, and they'd filmed it. Number 2. They used real F1 hand grenades on set. In the scene where the partisans are prepping weapons before an operation, those are actual Soviet F1 fragmentation grenades. The limonka, pineapple-shaped anti-personnel devices that could shred a human being in a 3-meter radius. The ISA props department couldn't source convincing replicas, and Klimov insisted on authenticity. So they requisitioned deactivated ordnance from military surplus. Standard procedure, right? Use real weapons with the explosives removed. Except deactivated is a relative term in 1984 Belarus, and the chain of custody on 40-year-old munitions is not exactly airtight. Crew members later admitted, in interviews years after the fact, that they had no idea if every single grenade had been properly cleared. They just hoped nobody dropped one the wrong way, hoped the pins were properly secured, hoped the deactivation process had been thorough. They were handling live military hardware in the mud, in the rain, with exhausted actors who'd been on set for 12 hours. The margins for error were non-existent. One gaffer said, "Every time I saw an actor pick one up, I'd take 3 steps back, just in case." Another crew member admitted he'd cross himself before every take involving the grenades, even though he wasn't religious. It was that kind of set, where the line between simulation and actual danger was so blurred that superstition made as much sense as safety protocols, and the actors had no idea. Kravchenko is juggling these things, tossing them from hand to hand, clipping them onto his belt. He's 14 years old and playing with devices designed to kill. Nobody told him there was even a theoretical risk. Klimov's philosophy was, keep the actors in the dark, let them think they're safe, and capture the kind of casual handling that comes from genuine ignorance. If they'd known these were real military grenades, deactivated or not, they would have handled them differently, moved differently, and the scene would have lost its authenticity. So Klimov just didn't tell them. He gambled with their lives for realism. And he won the gamble, because nobody died. But that's the ethos of Come and See distilled. Flirt with actual disaster, court real danger, and hope you survive to capture it on film. Number 1. Alexei Kravchenko never acted again after this film. He was supposed to have a massive career. Soviet cinema had just discovered a generational talent. A kid who could hold the screen like Falconetti in The Passion of Joan of Arc. Who could age 40 years through sheer force of internal collapse. Who could make you believe in the reality of hell on earth. Directors were lining up to cast him. Scripts were being written with him in mind. He was 14, and already being talked about as one of the greatest actors in Soviet history. And then he just stopped. After Come and See wrapped, Kravchenko walked away from acting almost entirely. He did a couple of minor roles years later, a TV movie here, a small part there, but nothing substantial. Nothing that required him to dig deep or transform or give anything resembling a real performance. He became a stuntman for a while, which is grimly ironic. He'd do dangerous physical work but refused to do dangerous emotional work. In interviews, he's been remarkably candid about why. He's said the experience of making Come and See was so intense, so psychologically damaging, that he couldn't imagine voluntarily putting himself through that kind of ordeal again. He said, "Klimov showed me what evil looks like. Really looks like. Not movie evil, but the actual face of human cruelty. And once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. You can't pretend it doesn't exist." Every script I read after felt fake, felt safe, felt like lying. He couldn't do romantic comedies or action films or anything that treated cinema as entertainment. The medium had been weaponized for him. It was a tool for excavating trauma, and he didn't want to be excavated anymore. He'd given everything he had, his face, his sanity, patches of his hair that turned white from stress, and he had nothing left to give. The film didn't just capture Florya's loss of innocence, it enacted Kravchenko's. He's talked about having nightmares for decades afterward. Images from the documentary footage Klimov made him watch, mixed with images from the shoot, mixed with his own childhood memories until he couldn't tell what was real. He'd wake up convinced he'd actually been in Belarus during the war, that he'd actually witnessed the massacres. Klimov had given him false memories, and they were more vivid than his real ones. Bonus: the machine gun that kills Florya at the end actually misfired, toward his head. In the film's climax, as Florya stands in the mud staring at Hitler's portrait, a German machine gun is firing in the background. The gun was loaded with blanks, aimed safely away from Kravchenko. Except during one take, the weapon malfunctioned and swung 20 degrees toward where the actor was standing. Blanks can still kill at close range. Ask Brandon Lee. The gunner caught the malfunction half a second before disaster, jerked the weapon upward, and Kravchenko never even knew he'd almost died. Klimov didn't tell him until years later. He said, "If I'd told him then, we'd never have finished the scene." That's the ethos of this entire production. Keep the actors in the dark. Let them think they're safe. And capture terror that's 1% real. Come and See didn't just portray the apocalypse. It flirted with causing one.